Hey beauties, good afternoon to you beautiful people. All right, listen to me now, beauties. I want to address a topic because we seem to promulgate false messages, false narratives, and run with information that can damage people for life, information that can be passed on to other generations, and we run with something that create and wreak havoc in the lives of people, especially our Caribbean people, predominantly or primarily here in Jamaica, because of how we have been cultured and what slavery had done to us. Now, there is a terminology, or there are two terminologies, two words called misogynists, and another one called misandrists. And the misogynists are men who, they say, hate women, and misandrists are women who hate men. But it is not necessarily from a sexual perspective, because you will still have these misogynists who will get married to the opposite sex, have children. Even if they don't get married, their sexual intercourse is predominantly or primarily or only with the opposite sex, because they still have that sex attraction to the opposite sex, the male attracted to the female. But what ends up happening, maybe because of an overbearing mother, an absent mother, or perhaps maybe some negative, consistent, incessant negative experiences with women who they were in relationships with, they develop a sense of bitterness, anger, resentment, possibly hate in their hearts. But it doesn't mean that they're a part of a particular community because they seemingly hate women. And when we say hate, the way how they speak to women, they're very abusive, they become very narcissistic, they become very arrogant. There is no affection between the two. The affectionate love is, it's devoid. So even though they will just go into the slam bam, thank you madam sort of intercourse sexually, but it doesn't mean that they are a part of a particular community. And the reason why I say this, here in Jamaica, if your tonality, if you don't have enough bass in your voice, and you're considered, if they still have this word beta male, then they consider you to be a part of a particular community, which you may not be. And they run with a false narrative and accusing people of being of the same, having attraction to the same sex, in which may not be true. Because you can have people who have that bass in their voice, they can come off very masculine, and yet their sexuality is not in tandem with the word of God. So we have to be, or we should be very careful in running with a narrative, because you do have men out there, yes, who may hate on women because of their own experiences, but it's not from a sexual perspective, because in their minds they say that they know that they say men belong to women, women belong to men. But I can't stand women who are this or that and the third, because of one, again, maybe a mother who was overbearing, she did not parent him well. It could have been a matriarch in the home who did not parent him well. If the mother wasn't available, he could have gotten in relationships that were similar to his experiences with his mother, and they were not good. And thus he has developed a resentment and bitterness vis-a-vis the misandrists. You have women who have had similar experiences. So they may not have had good relationships with both their mother and their father, or the father was absent, or he was not a good father. He was present in the home physically, but he was very aggressive and abusive and caustic. And what has happened is that she has grown with this sense of resentment. If she gets into multiple relationships that mirrors this sort of father that she had, who was, what they consider a deadbeat dad, a man who is arrogant and narcissistic, physically abusive, probably sexually abusive, unfortunately, and psychologically abusive, financially abusive, meaning they don't really support her, in the way she ought to have been supported financially. Then you find that the demon calls another one. And so when she gets into that relationship with the man, the same cycle continues from a romantic perspective. It doesn't mean that because she has negative encounters with men, romantically or sexually, that she's going to go on the opposite end or the other side. No. The hate is not in a sexual sense when they talk about misandrists, when they talk about misogynists. You do have pockets, perhaps, yes, but generally speaking, I want people to understand this reality because they run with false narratives. I was on a live, and because the man's voice didn't have the bass, and categorically he said he was giving up on relationships because he always invests in women and they treat him very badly. But when we sort of probed, he never spoke with this man for about 13 years. So it tells a story, but it doesn't mean that he's on the opposite end, that he's attracted to, the same sex. He says, I can tell you, and I never have, and I will never go that direction. And we have accused many men and women to be that way because of how they speak. Notwithstanding, I always talk about don't let your good be evil spoken of, because of how we are socialized in our Jamaican culture particularly. If your voice do not sound with a heavy bass in it and sound very masculine and your disposition doesn't come off that way, automatically they just sort of put you over into file 13 that you're a part of that particular community, or you're part of this, you're not a part of us, which may not be the case. He had mentioned also about, he says sex is important, but it's not the most important thing in his relationship. It's the intellect of the woman. It's her purpose. And you have a lot of men who are masculine who actually shares that, because we feel that once it's a man, that the only thing that comes across his mind towards his wife is sex. That's not true. The successful relationships, it cannot be sex only because he can get great sex elsewhere as well consistently. So that cannot be true. A lot of people don't understand that men are also stimulated by an intellectual, intelligent, solid thinking, a woman of understanding as well. Her femininity, but also a woman of understanding that will stimulate him and stimulate the particular whatever it is that in the brain waves that will make them want to engage in a sexual intercourse with the woman and to enjoy it completely. So if you see the man not necessarily going that direction as how we think they ought to, it doesn't mean that he's on the opposite side. It doesn't mean, because not all men are stimulated by just as they see the woman, they want to have sex. It means that he has lost control because that's not even normal behavior. That's abnormal behavior. We see in the Bible plethora of men who followed that regime, that thinking, and where it had landed them. Samson is a big example, He, the Bible talked about I think he was married before. It probably didn't work out or whatever it was, something of the sort. And when he met Delilah, it's like you wondered if women were finishing. That was the last woman on earth. He fell head over heels in love with Delilah, this sinister woman. He could not control himself. And that is why she was allowed to take his power, in a sense, away from him. She convinced him and took his power from him, both spiritually and physically. So we have to be very careful with things that we don't understand. That is why I encourage people to go and read, get yourselves educated, be in the know, be well read, understand life, see what is happening in the world, be abreast, realize fake information versus truth. And truth is now hidden, not necessarily truth is hidden in books. That is why you need to read, because when you read, you're enlightened. I read something in the book of Isaiah just recently about fasting and prayer, and people didn't understand that sometimes when you find that you're fasting and your prayers aren't answered, it's because you're oppressing people, you're treating people badly, and you end your fasting in quarrels and being cantankerous and being lewd and vulgar. You're desecrating who God is. You understand? The sanctity of who God is, the sacredness of who God is. And he's not a quarrelsome being. He's not an unjust being. He said you oppress people, and that word oppression kept coming. And I didn't even understand it. I don't oppress people, but I'm saying I became knowledgeable and I understood it. So I'm saying, God, I want to apply it to my life. And I'm encouraging people, because we are running with things and accusing people about their sexual orientation falsely. Listen to me. They did the world census, and when they did it, they said 3% of the population, let us say they didn't get everybody, and even if you want to put it to 4, went that way. And if you even check the cohort in that, some of them, they tell you that they're bi and tri and whatnot. Stop it. get knowledgeable so that you don't run with false information. Most people, it's false information up here, not truth. Follow me on this platform.